Greetings! It is I, Countess Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time to continue my review of some anime series and then giving you some information on how you can use them in your BESM games, your big eye, small mouth role-playing games. So, I'm going to go over some series, let you know a little bit of information about them, and of course, how you can use them in a role-playing game system, BESM in particular. This week we have, of course, two more from back in 2015, Seiken Tsukai no World Break and Yuri Kuma Arashi. But we also have two suggestions from the comments for the first two we're going to start with. So if you have any suggestions for series, I will add them to the list. Note that I don't get suggestions out every week. I usually will have a couple weeks of suggestions before we'll move back into talking about the ones from the latest season. But we will hit suggestions eventually again. So to do the two suggestions that I had for this week were, of course, Happy Lesson and Shaman King. Let's start with Happy Lesson. So Happy Lesson is both a number of OVAs, a couple series, and a manga. It focuses on a group of teachers who collectively, somewhat collectively, decide to help out this troubled and sort of uncaring orphan student. They all move in basically with him and become mother figures, effectively attempting to turn him around and become a productive member of society, to make him happy again almost. Hence the title of it. And each of them goes about this method in various unusual and trying ways. This is actually an interesting variation on a harem anime in a way too, because it is a bunch of females and one male, and all are vying for attention, just different than normal attention. Now the anime and manga have different main protagonists, so all the teachers remain the same, but protagonists change. In the anime, it's Chitose. So for the genres, of course, it's a comedy. A lot of funny things happen in it. They attempt really silly things in order to get Chitose, or the other character if you're looking towards the manga, to get actually on board with this entire situation. It is that unusual harem that Chitose does like all of them, but they're attempting to make these motherly connections. And any sort of romantic connections that exist there are incidental, and so it's not a full harem, but yet a harem. Kind of understand that there? It's an interesting take on the entire concept of it. And it's slice of life. They have their time at home, at school, and sort of everything sort of in between, existing on a normal life. So it's slice of life. Now I rate this one a 5. I did watch through both the series years ago, and I liked them a lot. They had just that right amount of comedy, and the take on a harem anime was interesting, because it wasn't like that full-blown, really. So I did enjoy it a lot. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I recommend, of course, 200 points. You're going to have your characters, the group of teachers. They're going to be attempting to help out, basically, an orphan character. Whether this boy or girl is going to be up to you. I mean, details of the setup are going to be completely up to how you want to establish them, how you want to put these relationships together. But the point will be that you'll be developing the relationship between your characters and this NPC student who needs them almost in their lives to a degree, to help repair them as a person who's kind of broken for whatever reason. And it's that relationships which are attempting to be paternal, which is going to be the focus of it. And each of the characters is going to come up with their own interesting techniques for bonding with them. And have them make sure it's a little unusual, just something not the norm for it, because the eccentricity of the characters should make the comedy sections of it. And you're basically going to then just have that daily life split between school and home, and you're going to make sure to have that bonding with the NPC and with each other too, because they're all going to be living together. So it's going to be an interesting setup there. Now, the other suggestion I had for today was, of course, Shaman King. Shaman King has also been manga and anime, and it focused on a character named Yo. Yo is, of course, a shaman, someone with special abilities that they have this connection between the lands of the living and the dead. Sho wants to be the Shaman King, which you have to do which if you gain that title, you basically gain a wish which you can alter the reality itself using this wish. In order to gain this title, you must win the shaman fight, which of course is a battle between shamans. Yo then gets his life kind of complicated a little bit more, but this entire beginning concept with his fiancée shows up, he runs into another people that end up being friends, and a lot of them do journey together in order to effectively gain this title, to give Yo the title of Shaman King, eventually. Now, for its genres, it's an action. There's battles using shamans to gain abilities to fight each other. It's adventure. They're traveling to new and unusual places in order to sort of continue this organization, this fight, which is organized about every 500 years. So it's got a lot of time that they can set up for these massive things that are going on. And supernatural. They summon the spirits of the dead and can sort of bond with them to gain new and unusual abilities that they can use to fight each other. Now, I rate this one a 4. Now, a lot of people rate it a 5. I know a lot of folks would probably rate this one a 5, but I, for one, just didn't dive into it as much. I did enjoy it a lot. 4 is pretty high for me still, but it wasn't one of the ones I would, like, snap right on. So that was one of those things. It just didn't hook me just a little bit. Just a little bit. It's still a really great series, and you might love it a lot more than me. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I would recommend 300 points. You're going to make your characters a team of shamans, and each of them will have their own initial goals for becoming the Shaman King. What really you should focus on is that regardless if you start out with them all being sort of rivals and come together as a group, or if you start them out as a group, one of them will have an upstanding goal amongst the others. You should let your characters decide in amongst them after they all individually come up with a goal, which one they want to support as the true goal of the group in the end. And once you've developed that, they're going to be participating in the shaman fight. Of course, this means maybe fighting as individuals, fighting as a group. You're going to have to sort of develop that along the way. They might deal with other groups, other shamans, which may or may not be sort of friendly rivals. And you can even deal with maybe some potentially dangerous rivals that are there are other teams that maybe their end goal is not one that you really want to happen. You know, maybe one that's bad for the world, similar to what happens in the series. But again, this is going to be up to you to develop which one you actually want to use. It's the matter of developing the characters, putting them together, and having them go about accomplishing this task. Now let's talk about the two from 2015, because we're pretty close to moving into 2014 with those older episodes, with Seiken Tsukai no World Break and Yuri Kuma Arashi. But let's start with Seiken Tsukai no World Break. We focus on Akane Academy in this one, where it's teaching students with special powers called saviors, who can summon the abilities to fight against monsters which are threatening the world, the metaphysicals. These saviors are unique. They're divided into two parts, a group called the White Iron and a group called the Black Mages. Effectively, they reawaken past lives and the abilities matching with those past lives and learn them in the modern day. So they take lessons from their past lives. We focus on Moroha, who happens to be a unique individual as he is awoken two past lives. One of the White Iron, one of the fighter type, and one of the Black Mages. One of that uses black magic. Along the way, though, he meets two characters. Satsuki, who happens to be the reincarnation of his sister from his White Iron time, and Shizuno, who happens to be the reincarnation of his queen during his time as a Black Mage. So the three of them then end up joining the Striker unit, the elite group of saviors from the academy. So of course it's an action series. They fight against monsters, battle with each other to train, always are looking to gain better abilities and dive deeper into their past lives, which are often violence-filled, and had them end pretty tragically. It's in a bit of way a fantasy. These past lives tend to be very fanciful. Maybe not even from a world that would be similar to ours, but like a fantasy world. They have huge magical battles and seemingly situations which feel more like a fantasy base. And you oftentimes see scenes of it as they remember their past lives. It's also called a supernatural. They use powerful mystical abilities, whether they're sword-based techniques or just magic-based techniques. A lot of them develop these and use them to fight against the metaphysicals. Now, of course, I rate this one a 4. Again, this is one that I liked a lot, and it drew me in. It was an interesting take because there was only the two characters he bonded with, so didn't have that like harem feeling of it. Even, you know, it had an interesting feel that he had two people he had a very strong bond with because of his past lives. But he was also unusually strong, but not like super overpowered, because it's still like you still have two things you're drawing from, but it's using them at the right times and things like that. So it's you might be able to get more techniques, but it doesn't mean that you can use them the best of your abilities. Interesting there. Now, if you're using this in a BESM game, I recommend 400 points. You're going to make your characters a group of saviors in the striker unit. They, of course, are going to oppose the metaphysicals. They're going to spend their normal time at school, which most likely will involve training with their past lives, developing their abilities, possibly fighting against some of each other, developing relationships with each other, which might match with relationships from past lives. It would be interesting for your PCs to somehow create a web of that. Of course, this doesn't mean you couldn't have more unusual characters that have more than one connection, that it would have both of them, but I would not recommend having all of your characters be this way. Maybe one, maybe two at most. Have them more being unique that they could use both, because they're going to have to split their points. You have to let them know that. They're going to have to split their points. But otherwise, it's just going to be dealing with school, training, and of course, each other. Because those developing relationships between each other is something that will help. That when the metaphysical attacks, you can have interesting storylines form out along those sides of those attacks. But let's move on and talk about Yuri Kuma Arashi. Now, the manga and the anime have vastly different plots. They really do. I'm going to focus on the anime because the manga's plot is interesting, but I feel like it doesn't have as much interest as in the animes does. So in the anime, we're set in a world where the Wall of Severance was built to separate out humans and bears. Something occurred that caused bears to basically start attacking people and devouring them. So they've been basically kept out now because they became much more dangerous than they were. They specifically were targeting people. We meet Lulu and Ginkgo, two bears which sneak across the Wall of Severance and disguise themselves as humans, basically transform into looking like humans, and enter into this academy for students in the area, Rashigoku Academy. There they focus on Kureha, who they take an interest in, who is a student who hates bears because she's lost a couple of her loved ones to them. Now, this is definitely a bit of a fantasy. They have bears that can transform to look like people and things like that occur. So you have like infiltrator bears that are always looking to eat people on the side, but also sometimes hiding it. And a very interesting kind of combination with that. It does have a very heavy fantasy element. I would also call it a Yuri. They're all girls, and so there's this weird connotations for eating with the bears sometimes too, that it's based upon love and relationships. So there's this kind of weird thing with it, and also the fact that the characters, many of them do like each other, and it is all female cast. So of course it definitely has this, it's in the title. It's in the title. I'd also call it a little bit of a science fiction. It seems to be set in like almost like a futuristic world a little bit, but it's not. It's like near future with an unusual alternate timeline because of killer bears. So things are very unusual that it has a feeling of this without a lot of direct explanation and showing of it. The series builds itself in an interesting way. Now I rate this one a 3. This is an interesting series that has a very unusual premise, and following it can be a little confusing until you sort of like watch it all together. It's hard to pick up on all the details of it right away, and a lot of the things that come at you can be a little confusing, which is one of the reasons it didn't fare as well in me. But sort of resolving the entire series and getting to the end helped a lot to improve my opinion of it. Basically, if you start out, you're probably going to be confused, and by the end, you're probably going to know a lot more, and that's going to help a lot. Effectively, that's the best way I can describe it. It's one of those type of series that you almost have to go through all of it to really pick up on it. I felt like, personally. But again, it might be also just lost in translation a little bit. So if you're using this in a BESM game, I'd recommend 200 points. You're going to make your characters students at Ashigoku Academy, and they're probably going to be dealing with bear attacks. And of course, the Invisible Storm, this group within the students that does things that the way they want to. Basically, the student organization, which isn't always for the best. You're going to have to deal with infiltrator bears, ones that disguise as people, of course. And of course, the characters are going to develop relationships with each other, and maybe some relationships with various NPCs that exist within the school setting. The various tragedies that affected the characters and drove them into the situations that they are now will be interesting points that you're going to need, along with interesting story points that the GM is going to add in order to fuel the storyline that they're building within this universe. So it's the combination of these two things which is going to drive where the characters are going to end up through the series and how relationships and things that are going on are going to develop. More than likely, you will have some NPCs pass away by the end of it, though it should tend to be unusual in the way that it's done. You know, tricky how everything will be played out. So, that's it for today. I introduced you to 4 more anime series. Of course, 2 that were suggested by you, my viewers, and 2 more from 2015. We're almost done 2015 and ready to move on to 2014. It's an unusual way of saying it. Again, as I've said in the past, the information I've provided you about these anime series, I've given you the easy way to use them in BESM, but you don't have to just use them in BESM. You could use any role-playing game system. The basic concepts that I've given you, translate. The rules side is what you're going to have to translate yourself. And there are some systems it's easier than others, but it's up to you to put them into these series if you want to play with them and use them. And there's plenty of series you can play that would be quite enjoyable to use. So, again, I'm just recommending BESM because that's what we're talking about today. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It shows your support for the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.